What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and one of the biggest mistakes you can make in fantasy football is overreacting to preseason, right? We've seen in the past, it was Amir Abdullah had like this huge run a few years ago, steamed him up draft boards, he went super high, and he wasn't great. But the things you really want to take away from preseason is not getting caught up in the hype of highlights and good plays. It's really more so looking at depth charts. Who is out there with the starters? What does the depth chart look like? Is this running back at the top of the order? Is he playing on third downs? We really want more of the information when it comes to defined roles. So today we're going to talk through 8 players that are skyrocketing up my rankings after week 2 of NFL preseason, kind of looking through the snap counts and seeing how these roles are starting to define themselves for this upcoming season. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Yes, stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen, she gon' let me.
Now, the inspiration for this video is every single Monday, every single Sunday, either Sunday night or Monday morning, I update the rankings on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find the link to get to the rankings either in the description or the comment section down below. I have my top 200 cheat sheet that I bring in to every single draft in the high stakes, home leagues, all of that. It's a checklist. You can do it on your phone. You can print it out. You can just have it on your laptop. It is really easy to read. I have them all tiered out. I have the ideal rounds that I'm drafting each player. And I'm trying to make sure that after every preseason week and we get some more news on injuries and roles and depth charts, that I keep it as up to date as possible for you guys, because I know home leagues are well underway at this point. So again, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You get the rankings, and then on top of that, in season, you get a bunch of cool stuff too, like weekly rankings, exclusive Patreon start-sit streams. We're going to be talking about a Patreon subscriber league here in a little bit. You get my rest of season rankings. You get my weekly waiver wire article where I talk through how much fab I'm spending on each of my favorite waiver wire claims and players. So a lot of stuff to check out there. But let's talk about the players that are skyrocketing on my rankings here. And this first player, or this first section of the video, we have a little bit of a 2-for-1 special here. Let's just talk through the Giants. We have Darren Waller and Jalin Hyatt. Darren Waller goes from my 603 as my tight end 6 to my 601 as my tight end 4 now. So I didn't really move him up a ton. I was already pretty ahead of market here, but he's getting steamed up for good reason. And we've now finally moved him ahead of Kyle Pitts and George Kittle as our tight end 4 after the big 3 of, I guess you could say big 3 of like Kelsey, Andrews. I don't know that Hawkinson gets in the big 3, but you guys know what I'm saying. They have been the consensus top 3 here. Waller for me, now the tight end 4. We'll get into Jalin Hyatt in a second, but Waller is just an absolute monster at this point. He ran 80% of the routes with the starters, right? This is, I think, 10 snaps of data. Shout out to Nathan Jonke on PFF. He charts all of the routes, snaps, targets, carries on the starting, when the starters are out there in preseason games, and it's really good stuff here. And we could see Darren Waller is out there for 8 routes of 10 total pass plays, which is perfect. 80% of the routes is pretty much what all of the elite guys run. Some of them will fluctuate a little bit more than that, but 80% plus is really strong. And then he was targeted on 4 of those 8 routes. Now, of course, he's not going to be a 50% target per route run guy in the season, but that's really strong. He is a big focal point of this offense. We've been hearing nothing but buzz out of camp. It's now carried over into preseason. He's running a lot of routes. He's getting targeted a lot. And if he is as big of a red zone target as they're making him out to be in training camp, he could have... It's not crazy to see him have 100-plus targets and like 10-plus touchdowns in 2023. That's what his upside looks like, just based off of what we've seen in terms of his target share potential on the Raiders. Now, again, that wasn't a big move up, right? I moved him up 2 spots, but 2 tight end spots, but still 5-6 turn, very much fine with Darren Waller. The big mover here, though, is Jalin Hyatt. We want to be betting on rookie wide receivers here. We can see, this is a chart from Jack Miller. Rookie wide receivers, as the year goes on or as the season progresses, they only get better, while veterans kind of break down, get hurt, they're older, past their primes. Whereas rookies we've seen in the past, Christian Watson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, be huge league winners down the stretch. And that's what we're betting on here with Jalin Hyatt. Now, he's not the starting wide receiver, but he was out there with the starters, right? 3 routes ran. He's behind Darius Slay and Hodgins and Campbell. Being the wide receiver 4 and rotating in with the starters is just fine. Again, we don't need him to break out till the end of the season. There could be an injury in front of him. He could work his way up the depth chart. But as long as he's in the mix, right? We got these early reports like a couple months ago that Jalin Hyatt was buried on the depth chart, wasn't even running out there with the ones. As long as he's in the mix with the ones in preseason so far, he's on track to be one of these potential rookie breakout guys. And you can get him much later than your Marvin Mims, Jonathan Mingo, Rashee Rice tier. And to me, he's in that same area. So I actually moved him up all the way from my 1604 as my wide receiver 77 to my 1301 as my wide receiver 63. So 14 wide receiver spots and 3 rounds up the rankings for Jalin Hyatt. He's somebody I want more of. He's a good prospect. He ran a 4.4. He produced in the SEC at Tennessee. And when we look at his rookie comps in my database, it comes out like they come out pretty strong. Like they're not the greatest comps of all time, but these aren't his comps. He is a gold wide receiver prospect in my model. My prospect model has bronze, silver, gold, elite, legendary. Gold wide receivers hit top 24 seasons 45% of the time, and these are your only gold wide receivers not drafted inside the top 2 rounds. Of course, you have duds like Earl Bennett and Dante Moncrief, but his prospect profile is one of the strongest we've seen outside of the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft. He was actually supposed to be a top 2 round pick, and he just fell in the NFL draft, but being in the same group as like Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, a bunch of guys who really shouldn't have fallen in the NFL draft, is a good thing. Of course, he's not a shoo-in to be a good player in the NFL, but he is a good bet, a better bet than you would think for a round 3 NFL draft pick. So Jalin Hyatt, a guy that I am drafting more of at this point in the offseason. Now, next up, we have Javonte Williams. He has gone from my 706 up to my 611, so about a half a round of ADP, and I moved him from RB24 to RB20. So 4 running back spots, about a half a round of rankings, and I just keep inching up Javonte Williams. I know we're really scared off by the ACL, but my thought was we'd have Samaje Perine as the 1A there as Javonte worked along week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. But we're coming out here in the starters in the preseason game. Javonte outsnapped Samaje Perine already. He's already the 1A. He was the 1A here. He had 8 opportunities to Samaje Perine's 3 opportunities. Like, he's already operating as the lead guy. And you have to imagine as the season goes on, he only gets more and more of those opportunities, which is really exciting. We know Sean Payton uses these running backs in a pass-catching role. We've seen with Reggie Bush, Alvin Kamara. We've even seen it with guys like Pierre Thomas. This is crazy. I mean, Darren Sproles as well. This is crazy to see 5 targets here. He was the most targeted player on offense with the starters. And this is a guy coming off an ACL injury, and he had the most opportunities. He was targeted in the passing game. Like, there's a ton of upside here. Again, there is a downside of the ACL, but he's way ahead of schedule. Like, this is he has a similar injury to what J.K. Dobbins had, but J.K. Dobbins was not this far along at this point. Like, we still have 2-3 weeks until week 1 kickoff at this point, and Javonte is out here as the 1A, taking a lot of the snaps, a lot of the opportunities. There's tons of upside here. Pass catching role in this offense. You have Sean Payton coming in that's going to really revamp this offense. To me at this point, the ACL risk is baked in at that 6-7 turn. I give you my full stamp of approval at that 6-7 turn. If Javonte's there, you can definitely take him. After that, we have James Cook, who I keep moving up as well here. He goes from my 710 as my RB25 to my 701 as my RB22. So 3 running back spots, 9 spots up the rankings. He's also a guy. 6-7 turn, you can take him anytime that he is available in the 7th round. I think James Cook is probably a good play here. Now, it's important to note that, yes, Damian Harris is hurt, but Latavius Murray was already sort of rumored to be ahead of Damian Harris on the depth chart, and even still, James Cook played 14 of 16 snaps with the starters this week. Now, that's not to say he's going to have that in the NFL season, right? That would have led the NFL in snap share last year when it comes to running backs, but it's still a really, really strong sign that I was under the assumption that he was going to be a strictly passing down back, like 2-minute drill, third down stuff, and then maybe mix in between the tackles. This kind of hints that he's going to be a 3-down NFL back on one of the best offenses in the NFL. I was a little bit concerned because, to me, he was never a bell cow in college or someone that was all that special in college, but we now have a guy who has 2nd-round draft capital, 14 of 16 snaps. Like, that's the same amount of snaps that Gabe Davis and, like, Stephon Diggs had. Like, he is very much a core piece of this offense, James Cook. They want to use him, and that's super impressive. Now, the touches weren't really crazy, right? Just 3 carries, no targets, but being on the field with the starters is enough for me. Again, this is going to be a good offense that scores points. You just want pieces of this offense. And if James Cook is truly going to be in this role where he's not some like gadget and he's a every down running back for this team, you have to move him up accordingly. Now, our 4th player we're going to talk about here is Kenneth Gainwell, who goes from my 1207 as my RB50 to my 1009 as my RB44. So I moved him up 2 rounds and 6 running back spots. And this is what it comes down to. The Eagles had 32 rushing touchdowns last year. The Cowboys had the 2nd most at 24. Eagles have the best rushing attack in the NFL. They have the best offensive line in the NFL, and they have a scrambling quarterback who isn't great for the pass-catching upside of these running backs, but it's great for the efficiency of these running backs. We've seen Lamar Jackson has had J.K. Dobbins, where his yards per carry is insane. Justin Fields attached to Khalil Herbert. He led the NFL in yards per carry last year. When you have these rushing quarterbacks that take one of the guys in the box and make them read them, right, on read options and, freezes them up, it makes the boxes that much lighter. Combined with that crazy offensive line, you can get a lot of efficiency here. And you have Gainwell, who is now heading into year 3 on this Eagles offense. Rashad Penny's new. DeAndre Swift is new. He has the most continuity here, Gainwell. And it seems, as of right now, right, he was getting drafted going into the season like Rashad Penny was the RB2 and Gainwell was the RB3. It seems like he's, I wouldn't even say leapfrogged. It just seems like he is the RB2 here. DeAndre Swift was given the night off. Gainwell had 8 snaps, Penny 6, Boston Scott 3. I would imagine that's kind of how the depth chart looks. I would imagine it's Swift, Gainwell, Penny, Boston Scott at this point. And we even see that Gainwell's getting some rave reports out of camp. It says Swift has emerged as the pass-catching back, will be on the field on 3rd down and 2-minute situations, similar to the role Gainwell occupied last year. When it comes to Gainwell, however, it looks like he's being promoted to a future back spot. Gainwell has increasingly been the team's early down back, where he's getting touches as a runner. I thought that might be Penny. Where Penny finds himself, I don't know why I'm struggling here, but Gainwell has undoubtedly had a stronger camp. He's gotten the vast majority of first-team carries and excelled there on Wednesday. So they almost think that instead of Gainwell still being that passing down specialist he was last year, they're saying Gainwell might be the featured guy, which is actually what Miles Sanders' role was last year, right? This like in-space, efficient back between the tackles, between the 20s, mixing in on the goal line. And in an offense like this, that's a huge role to have. On top of that, Gainwell can catch passes really well. So there's he is the RB2 on the depth chart with a path to 3-down workload in an amazing offense. So I think that's something you just sort of have to chase again. We moved him up 2 full rounds, 6 running back spots. He's somebody that you need to be targeting at this point. Again, we just want pieces of this rushing offense. Gainwell, if he's going to be RB2 on this depth chart, he needs to be going higher is kind of the bottom line. Now, after that, we have a bunch of rookies here. First being Kendre Miller, who, we just talked about moving him down the rankings, but Kendre Miller is kind of a beast, where, he had a knee sprain in the first preseason game, and the reports were saying that he wasn't going to be with the team or, having meaningful snaps until week 1. It was pretty much, up in the air. He'll probably be ready by week 1. He's going to be working back from this thing. The guy comes out here and takes on a bell cow workload in the second preseason game. So it's not even like he was eased in or split carries with some random practice squad back on the Saints. He just took 25 of 32 snaps, 13 routes run, 3 targets, 10 carries, 13 opportunities in that span. Now, of course, this isn't with the starters, right? A.T. Perry is out there and Lynn Bowden. This is just the second team, if you will. But that's a lot of volume to handle for a guy who was coming off of an injury that was pretty scary. And I moved him way down because it was scary that he already came into rookie camp with an injury that he was rehabbing from, so he was already behind. And with these rookies, you need them to be in the rooms, on the field, being there for the install of a lot of these plays and sucking or absorbing it all in. So it's tough. But now that he's back and he's handling, if you're going to handle 13 opportunities in a preseason game, you're probably not all that hurt. So that's great. Now, of course, I'm not saying that he's ahead of Kamara. I'm not saying he's ahead of Javonte Williams. But again, the concern was that he wasn't going to be in the mix. But now he is going to be squarely in the mix with Javonte Williams early on in the season while Kamara is on suspension. And we love him for all the same reasons that we loved him early on in this offseason. He's one of my highest drafted players. And things are starting to look up for him again where he's going to get a workload. He's a really efficient runner. He has a lot of juice. He even was out there, 3 targets is pretty huge for a guy like Kendre Miller that I was sort of assuming was just going to be a between the tackles back. So Kendre Miller, arrow pointing back up on him. To me, he's in that Roschon Johnson area of these rookie running backs that don't have a clear defined role just yet, but we think can kind of carve those out later in the season. So I moved him from my 12-10 as RB53 to my 11-05 as my RB50. So that was 3 running back spots, but a round and a half up the rankings, back in a spot where I'll be drafting a ton of him. Next up, we have Luke Musgrave here. Luke Musgrave went from unranked to the 1507 as my tight end 20 here. And he just keeps getting a ton of buzz. And I think people are a little bit scared off by a guy like Musgrave because rookie tight ends don't produce. But Dwayne McFarland has a really good point here. He's somebody that's really sharp in this space. Rookie tight ends that earn targets in college often display the same traits in year one. Why don't they succeed? Playing time. Last 2 rookies to reach 75% route participation, Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, both finished in the top 12. So if you can get to 75% plus of the routes as a rookie, finishing in the top 12 isn't all that crazy. It's just a matter of if you get drafted as a rookie, a lot of times you're going to be splitting tight end routes with another guy, and you'll be at like 60%. But if you can get to that 75% plus number again, Waller was at 80%. We saw as well Musgrave here was at 100%. Now, of course, he's not better than Waller. 100% of the routes might not be feasible during the season, but 100% of the routes is a really, really strong sign. Like, he is the starting tight end. DeGuara is awful. Tucker Kraft is behind both of them on the depth chart. I mean, he ran 9 of 9 routes, 100%. Again, it's a small sample. 100% of the routes isn't really going to be feasible here, but that's very clearly above that 75% threshold. So I'm down to bet on Luke Musgrave in an offense where his only competition for targets is really Christian Watson, and then after that, it gets a little shaky with like Dobbs and Jaden Reed, who's another rookie as well. There's going to be a lot of opportunity there. You have Jordan Love, a young quarterback that might be leaning on a tight end like this. I think there's a ton of upside here, especially as a guy who is an absolutely freakish athlete. Right, where he comes out here, and he is 6'6", 253 pounds, runs a 4.61, great burst score, great speed score, great catch radius. And in my model, he grades out well as well. We built a tight end model this offseason, and he grades out as a freak, which just means, you have a certain 40-time speed score, agility score. He's a monster. He is the highest relative athletic score in this entire list, and his comps that come out are Travis Kelce, Jared Cook, Kobe Fleener. He's not a guy that produced a ton in college, but tight end production doesn't really matter a ton. From the research we did this offseason, tight end production doesn't really matter when it comes to prospects. It's really just, are you a freak athlete? And that's really the key to upside here. And that's what Luke Musgrave is. He's somebody that I want to be betting on for this upcoming season. Then we have another rookie here, and Michael Wilson. I didn't like Michael Wilson at all coming out of Stanford. I didn't really think that he was a round 3 pick. I think Josh Palmer's a great comp, like Dez Fitzpatrick, some of these overdrafted, like top 4-round wide receiver, but day 2 draft capital is really meaningful. And he's somebody that, speaking of routes, he was out there. He ran as many routes as Marquise Brown. He ran more routes than Rondale Moore. He was out there for the most snaps among wide receivers, and this was the starting lineup, right? You have Cole McCoy, James Conner, all of these guys out there, and Michael Wilson was out there in 2 wide receiver sets as one of the starting wide receivers. And again, rookie wide receivers breed that late season upside. Michael Wilson, a guy that I don't love, but again, day 2 pick, right? He goes in the 3rd round, and he's a starting wide receiver in the NFL, and he's pretty much free. He goes from unranked in my rankings. I finally put him in there. He is my 1508 as my wide receiver 73 now. And to me, he's worth a late round flyer. We took him last night in our high stakes stream. He's somebody in like the last round of a draft of like your Hyatt and your Reeds and your, of course, your Marvin Mims, Mingo, Rashee Rices are all gone. He's a fun upside pick if you need some wide receiver upside, right? Like if you're weak at wide receiver and you stack on like these Zay Jones profiles and these sort of like high floor Tyler Boyd type guys, you'd need to take that home run swing. And Michael Wilson is a guy who's like kind of unknown, is a decent upside swing. And now, again, my model doesn't like Michael Wilson, but you also have guys like Terry McLaurin and Austin Pettis, or not Austin Pettis. I was going to say Dante Pettis, but no, that's Austin Pettis. But Terry McLaurin was also like not a great prospect. Christian Watson was a silver in my model. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a silver in my model. So silver isn't the end of the world. He could break out. Prospect profile to me doesn't matter a ton when it just comes to year 1 breakout, especially when we're drafting these players pretty much for free. So I'm fine betting on Michael Wilson. I don't love him, but he's a guy who we've now officially added to the rankings. Now, the last guy we'll talk about here is Rico Dowdle. Out of South Carolina, he went from unranked to my 1603 as my RB67. This is just a little bit of a bonus here because he's like in a home league. You're probably not drafting Rico Dowdle, though. I think that he's kind of worth a pickup because Tony Pollard's handcuff is going to be one of the most coveted assets in fantasy football. Where if Tony Pollard was to go down, and you had a bell cow running back on that offense that's going to score well with Dak Prescott and have a good offensive line, that's a guy that is pretty much going to be a top 15 starting running back every week. It just comes down to who you think it's going to be. As of right now, Rico Dowdle's gotten a ton of buzz, and he seems to be at the top of the depth chart here, where he had 16 snaps from Malik Davis's 9 snaps in terms of like the second team unit, and then Deuce Vaughn came in later. To me, I would say Deuce Vaughn's 4th on the depth chart, with Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis sort of competing for this handcuff spot. And it seems as of right now, Rico Dowdle has a little bit of a leg up on him. Now, I don't think it's a done deal at this point. I think they're going to compete the entire preseason. I think all three of these backs. But I know a lot of people have been drafting Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn. Rico Dowdle is much more under the radar. If you're drafting these handcuffs, these Cowboys handcuffs, either on Underdog or in a home league, make sure you're mixing in Rico Dowdle. He is somebody that's very firmly in the mix. That's not getting any type of shine right now. So I wanted to make sure I shouted him out. He has size, right? He's like 5'11", 213 pounds, 4.5 speed, decent college share and target. He can do it all, decent 3-down back. Again, we want handcuffs in good offenses. Rico Dowdle has a legit case to be that. Now, that's going to do it for us today. Maybe I'll start doing this every Monday where we kind of break down some of the stuff that happened over the weekend, if any big injuries happen. We'll see how this video does, but that was around, 8 players skyrocketing my rankings. Again, if you want the complete top 200 rankings cheat sheet, that'll be on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And as always, if you can't support there, any likes, subscribes, comments helps the boy out a ton. It is August. We're grinding harder than we've ever grinded right now. We'll be streaming tonight. As always, I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.